Speaker. We agree. Thank you so much.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver-Grenville.
In 2020, the UN Secretary General noted that the, quote, approach to and handling of mass graves has too rarely been respectful or lawful. Canada has no legal framework to address the Tk'emlúps site nor any other sites that will come to light. The legal framework has led to the deaths of these children. That legal framework, the Indian Act, remains in place. Will the Prime Minister do what is needed and establish a legal framework for mass and unmarked graves, meeting human rights norms, including ensuring all records are kept and released, sites protected, criminal investigations conducted, and that the families can heal and are appropriately compensated?
The Honourable Minister.
I thank the member for the question, but also the opportunity for the clarification. Kupki Kashmir's made it very clear this was not a mass grave, although it is heartbreaking that when we learned it, at the possibility of all the remains of children at the former Kamloops residential school. We are also reaching out to Indigenous communities to make sure that all other communities are able to, with the support of the NCTR, be able to find their lost children, and we will make sure that this is done in a proper and legal way.
I'm afraid that's all the time we have. C'est tout le temps que nous avons aujourd'hui. The Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal Bloc Coalition cutting off debate on their internet censorship bill is an act of cowardice by this government. They're doing this because they're afraid of the public backlash against going down in history as the government that trampled over Pierre Trudeau's Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In my riding of Saskatoon West, constituents have made it clear that they do not want this Prime Minister to censor their social media posts. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-10 will censor Canadians' Facebook and TikTok posts. Will the government do the courageous thing, reverse course, and stop Bill C-10?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, according to the member for Lethbridge, and I quote, Arts Fund actually goes toward a very niche group of artists that are stuck in the early 90s because they haven't managed to be competitive on the new platform. She also added, and I quote, these artists are not able to make a living off what they're producing, so they require grants that are given by the government. So I would like to know if a series like Heartland, in its 15th season, filmed in Alberta, is one of those outdated series. Or perhaps the member would wish to comment on Schitt's Creek, a winner of 9 Emmys, is also one of those series that is stuck in the early 90s because they haven't managed to be competitive on the new platforms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for South Surrey, White Rock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's being reported that more than half of the $2.9 billion Canadian Emergency Student Benefit Funds went to those in households with more than $100,000 in annual.
Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Finance Minister promised 1 million jobs by the end of June. Well, here we are at almost the end of June, and the numbers are painting a very different picture. 300,000 jobs lost in the last 2 months because of the Liberal vaccine failure. While in other countries like the US and the UK, economies are roaring back, here, Canadians continue to live locked down at home without a paycheck and continuing to see their savings emptied. Mr. Speaker, when will the Liberals finally release a detailed plan to reopen our economy and get Canadians back to work?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, if the Conservatives want to talk about the economy, let's talk about the economy. As of May 2021, over 2.4 million of the 3 million jobs lost at the peak of the pandemic, 8 in 10 have already been recouped. And Mr. Speaker, on April 26th, S&P reaffirmed Canada's AAA rating. And just last week, Moody's also reaffirmed our AAA rating. Our plan is sustainable, responsible, and it's working.
Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, I ask this question yet again. President Biden ordered U.S. intelligence to investigate two likely theories on the origin of the coronavirus. One, that it originated from human contact with an infected animal, and the other, that it came from a lab accident at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The government says it supports the U.S. investigation. Given that government scientists at the Winnipeg lab worked closely with the Wuhan lab, will U.S. investigators have access to these government scientists and their relevant documents, including lab notes?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague for the question. And as he rightly pointed out, we support President Biden's call to fully investigate the origin of the COVID virus using the best science and information available. And we in Canada will help in any way we can.
Member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Well, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the government can start helping by answering questions that we have been asking about the national security breaches at the Winnipeg lab. Clearly, there were breaches, and we need answers. When will it start answering the questions we are asking, such as why were the two government scientists fired from the Winnipeg lab? Where are these two government scientists? How did a Chinese military scientist get access to this top-level lab in Winnipeg? And were there any unauthorized transfers of materials from Winnipeg to Wuhan?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I have written to the chair of the NSI COP committee to refer this issue to the appropriate place to study these questions. As well, the agency has provided the committee the unredacted documents through the clerk, the House clerk. Thank you.
The
Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, Canada had an agreement with China that allowed Dr. Q to share information and virus samples with the Wuhan Virology Institute, but 2 months after Dr. Q coordinated sending several viruses to China, including Ebola, she was escorted out of the lab and the RCMP began an investigation. It's clear that the termination of the doctor was for a reason that was much more serious than sending a virus. In compliance with established protocol, Canadians want to know, why did the Prime Minister hide the truth? The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, as that member opposite probably just heard, I have written to the chair of the NSI COP committee, which is the appropriate level of security to review items of national security. I've referred this issue to the chair. As well, the agency has provided the unredacted documents to the House clerk to work with that committee. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the U.S. Commerce Department announced it intends to double Canadian softwood lumber duties. This will be devastating to our forestry sector and further increase costs for Canadians due to our integrated market. The last negotiated agreement by Conservatives expired in 2015. The Prime Minister promised then to have a new softwood agreement within 100 days of taking office. It has been over 2,000 days and 3 U.S. presidents. When will the government get serious on this issue? Or is this another Liberal broken promise?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin and state again unequivocally that the duties imposed by the U.S. on Canadian softwood lumber are unwarranted and unfair. We will always vigorously defend our softwood lumber industry and workers. We will do this through litigation, whether it is Chapter 19 in NAFTA or Chapter 10 of CUSMA, as well as at the WTO. I raise this issue at every opportunity. We will continue to work with the United States on this. And we've consistently said and reiterated that it is in the best interest of both countries to reach a negotiated settlement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, I'd say the Liberals are all talk and no action, but there's not even talk. On Friday, I questioned the Trade Minister where she was unable to say she had taken any action whatsoever to raise this issue with her U.S. counterparts. She cannot point to a single meeting or call that had taken place since the May 21st tariff increase announcement, despite claiming it was her top priority. When will the minister stand up for Canadians and start doing her job?
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, to the honourable member, this is a top priority for this government. I have raised this issue with the President, with the USTR, as well as with the Commerce Secretary. We have been working with Canadian industry, with Canadian labour, with the Canadian communities to which this issue impacts. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that I continue to vigorously defend the Canadian softwood lumber industry and the forestry sector, and we will continue to do this important work.
We're talking about jobs, getting people back to jobs. Canadians want to earn a paycheck, and that's not what's happening, Mr. Speaker. In the U.S., 500,000 new jobs were created. 68,000 jobs were lost in Canada over the same period. Its employment levels are 3% below pre-pandemic levels. But Canadians who should be at work are still at home. What is the government's plan to get Canadians back to work? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, allow me to be perfectly clear. Our government will always stand up for Canadian workers. We've taken steps to protect 5.3 million jobs through the emergency wage subsidy. And what's more, Mr. Speaker, in Budget 2021, we announced the introduction of the hiring program to encourage employers by providing subsidies to cover some of the reopening and rehiring costs. We know that there's still a lot to be done, and that is why our government will continue to support workers and Canadian families. The Honourable Member for La Prairie. Mr. Speaker, Quebec wants to apply Bill 101 to federally regulated businesses in order to protect French as a language of work. But the minister keeps telling us she wants to extend the scope of the Official Languages Act.
Le député de Montmagny-Lillet, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup, un rappel au règlement.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During question period, during one of the Minister of Heritage's answers, the sound was so bad that I had to take my headset off. Twice, two members of the Bloc Québécois had their microphones on continuously, which is completely unacceptable after 14 months of using this technology. Last week, I was in Ottawa, and I saw that the sardine boxes that our translators are working and the conditions that we're forcing them to work in with this technology, which not only hurts their ears, but, Mr. Speaker, I invite you to take the measures that are needed to ensure that the use of technology to speak in the House of Commons is used appropriately, and that the sound when we speak is listenable. It's very disruptive, Mr. Speaker. I would like to thank the honourable member. In fact, it was quite disruptive. That is the responsibility of every member. They have to ensure that their microphone is not on when they do not have the floor. Thank you to the honourable member for having brought this to our attention. Once again, I would remind every MP that it is important not to speak when one's microphone is on and it is not their turn. When it comes to quality, we did have some problems. I was ready to interrupt the minister, but the sound did get fixed. As parliamentarians, when we know that there might be a problem, it's worthwhile to verify that the microphone is working correctly.
Point of order, coming from the honourable member for Wellington, Halton Hills.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, a very short point of order. As you know, Mr. Speaker, the House ordered the production of unredacted documents from the Public Health Agency of Canada by the end of day last Friday. The Minister of Health during question period twice indicated that the Public Health Agency of Canada has delivered the unredacted documents to the House Clerk. Can you confirm that that is the case, Mr. Speaker?
I can confirm, and I will be tabling the documents or the letter when we return, or when we're under the rubric of tabling documents this afternoon.
Don't forget to like, dislike, subscribe, and comment. Safe Space Cafe. And always, have a good day.